Now dare to cross forbidden boundaries to the ultimate adventure.
Come on!
Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, also known as the Indiana Jones Adventure in Disneyland, California, is and always has been my personal favorite attraction. But it's certainly not what it used to be. Since its opening day in 1995, numerous effects have been broken, shut off, and ultimately abandoned. Today I wanted to bring to you a definitive list of all of these effects so that we can all lament together. When the ride first opened, it was sponsored by AT&T. And up through 2002, when the sponsorship ended, guests were given decoder cards upon entering the temple that they could use to translate the various maraglyphs while waiting in the queue. Obviously, you can still translate the maraglyphs using your phone today, but it's not quite the same, as the cards were essentially a free souvenir to take home. The queue to the ride contains several special effects to fully immerse guests before they even see the ride itself. One of these effects was an homage to the second Indiana Jones movie, in which a booby trap causes a spike ceiling to start to lower and threaten to crush Dr. Jones. This effect was activated by pulling on a bamboo pole, which would then cause the spike ceiling to lower a couple inches, and the bamboo pole itself would bend and strain to keep the ceiling up. This effect still partially works today. The bamboo pole still bends, but the ceiling no longer moves at all. Some people think the effect is broken altogether, but if it's not working for you, just wait a couple seconds and pull really hard on that bamboo pole. It has a long reset time and is pretty hard to get to go off. This next effect is pretty similar to the previous one, and in fact it takes place in the very next room of the queue. But unlike the falling spike ceiling, this effect never saw the light of day. When you enter this room, you'll notice diamonds on the floor as well as pillars of stone on your sides, and from what you'll be able to gather, stepping on a diamond will cause a pillar of stone to fall and crush you, another booby trap set by the creators of the temple. This effect would have caused stepping on one of the diamonds to lower the floor by a couple centimeters, and the pillar above you by a couple centimeters as well. But insurance examiners thought that this was a liability, as the floor lowering could have caused someone in flip-flops to trip, and the ceiling lowering could have caused a child on the shoulders of a parent to have their head bonked, which is possibly why the spike ceiling was shut off as well. When the ride begins, the vehicle enters what is known as the Chamber of Destiny. Originally, an effect created the illusion that the vehicle would randomly enter one of three doors, either left to the Observatory of the Future.
You see the future. I will lift the curtain of time. It is your destiny.
Straight down the middle towards the Chamber of Earthly Riches.
You seek the treasure of Mara, glittering gold. It is yours.
Or right towards the Fountain of Youth.
You have chosen wisely. This path leads to timeless youth and
When in actuality, the vehicle would only ever take one track down a central path. The illusion was done with 4 dummy doors, one real door and path, and a room whose walls and ceiling could rotate. The company that originally made the effect went out of business, so replacing the pieces that were needed would have ultimately been too expensive. So when the main cable that rotated the room snapped in 2014, the effect was shut down for good. Nowadays, 3D mapping projections are used to create the illusion of entering 3 different rooms, but the car only ever goes down through the central door and path. The projections that are used now are pretty awesome, especially the ones that are used on Mara's face, but in my opinion, they just don't compare to the rotating room effect. After inevitably looking into Mara's eyes, the vehicle will veer left towards the Tunnel of Torment. This area originally had several effects that worked together to create the feeling that Mara was picking up the vehicle and sending you to sort of a different dimension where the gates of doom are open. The room was originally filled with fog, so you could not see the floor, and the lightning effects on the walls would seem to be coming from another realm. In addition to that, the vehicle would have a floaty effect in the area, kind of like you're riding on a cloud. And last but not least, down in front of the gates of doom that Indy is holding shut, there was supposed to be a cyclone of smoke. A similar effect is now used in Tokyo's version of the Indiana Jones adventure ride, and it's really, really cool. Up next is a very short-lived but incredibly awesome effect. Upon getting your first glimpse at the cavern of bubbling death, the giant decrepit face of Mara would shoot a laser at the ceiling and cause rubble to fall from the sky. This effect was done using a machine that would create giant blocks of brown dyed ice that would then be shattered right as Mara shot at the ceiling. The effect didn't last very long, and while we're not entirely sure why it was shut off, we can assume that it was because the water from the ice quickly corroded the machine and it was just too expensive to upkeep. Not to mention it had a long reset time every 18 seconds, so not every vehicle would even see the effect in the first place. After that encounter, vehicles will enter the Mummy Chamber, where the cursed souls of those who have previously gone past the gates of doom reside. Originally, fans would blow gusts of wind up to 60 miles an hour at the vehicles as they pass through. The fans are still there, but they're no longer turned on. If you look really closely in the dark, you can see them. I don't know why they were shut off, and to be honest, I don't know what they were doing there in the first place, but I think it would have been a pretty cool effect to feel. Occasionally, when Mara shoots his laser, a ball of fire will erupt from the location that he hits. This effect used to happen more frequently, and ask anyone who was on the ride during its early years, those fireballs used to be much more intense, creating a wave of heat that could be felt from the vehicle as passing by. The fireballs nowadays are a little more wimpy and don't happen every single time Mara shoots his laser, though they still are around and they still are pretty neat. Now, I'm not sure if this next effect really qualifies as a broken or abandoned effect, but considering that a lot of people who go on the ride don't even know what it's supposed to be, it's at the very least a failed effect. Towards the end of the ride, the vehicle will stall out in a dark room where the sounds of rats scurrying along the floor can be heard all around you. At the end of this room is a wall of fog with a projection of a log covered in rats in front of you. The vehicle will then speed through the fog and the log will dissipate. The problem is the fog wall isn't very good, so it's really hard to tell what you're even supposed to be looking at. Not to mention, the last few times I've been on the ride, the fog wall has been turned off entirely, which hopefully means that they might be replacing it with a newer state-of-the-art fog wall like the one on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, but I guess time will tell. Now, those of you who want to defend this as a good effect, be my guest, but as a counter-argument, I would like to show you the effect that is used on the Tokyo version of the Indiana Jones ride in place of the rat log. Rat log, not so good. Giant stone face that yells Japanese and then shoots a fireball at you, on the other hand. Now, apart from the Boulder finale occasionally not resetting as well as it's supposed to, the remainder of the ride works more or less as well as it did on opening day. But there's one more effect throughout the entire ride that has been toned down. You see, the tracks of the ride itself are not actually bumpy, despite the fact that the ride feels like you're on rough and rugged terrain. And this is because the design of the vehicles allows programmable bumpiness in the road. Now, on opening day and for the first couple years of the attraction, it was much more rugged and bumpy than it is today. But a lot of guests were complaining that it was painful or that they sustained injuries from the ride and tried to sue Disney. Eventually, the movements of the vehicles were all dialed back a bit to give the ride a slightly smoother and more safe feel. So that's about it. Other effects such as Mara's laser or the ghost of Mara in the mudslide scene have been broken before but have since been repaired and are now working. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. If any one of these effects could come back, which would you most like to see? For me personally, it would have to be the rotating chamber of destiny. I just think that was the coolest effect, to be able to feel like you're going into a different room despite riding the same ride. But a lot of these effects are pretty awesome. So which would you most like to see? Well, that does it for this first ever episode of Disneylander. If you enjoyed it and you learned something new, you'll be happy to know that I already have several other videos in the works, so remember to subscribe and keep checking by for the next upload. And more importantly, if you have another friend who is a huge Disneyland fan, if you could do me a huge favor and send this video their way if you think they might enjoy it, that would be incredible. I am going to go get my quesadilla off the stove before it burns. And it's gonna be delicious. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.